the Northwoods home of classic rock and your favorite hits. 99.1 WIKB, Iron River, Crystal Falls, Florence. A listen-up radio station.
Opinions expressed by paid sponsors may not reflect the opinions of WIKB, Queen Bee's Knees LLC, and Morgan Murphy Media, parent companies or affiliates of the companies with which paid sponsors are affiliated. Now, here's Dr. Larry.
Did you know? Let's go.
You've waited all week.
Every week, we continue to learn how to achieve a better back and ultimately better health.
Live in the WIKB studios, this is Dr. Larry.
Well, thank you for the flex capacitor, Big Timmy. Hello again, everybody. Okay, let's get it started. Well, as you know, every show builds on the next. Every week, we continue to learn how to achieve a better back and ultimately better health. Now, in case any of you missed it, last week we talked about seed. It was an important week to be tuned in because we learned and defined about seeds and how they grow because, let's face it, it's different than the laboratory artificial glow. So here it is again. Seed versus synthetic. Which one is more sympathetic? Seed is started in the dirt. Synthetic is grown in the lab. Which one can your body best grab? Let's compare seed formation and pharmaceutical formulation. A tomato plant. It can manufacture thousands of unique chemical compounds during its life cycle, using nothing more than sunlight, water, minerals, and a tiny seed. Meanwhile, many modern medications begin their journey with something else entirely. Petroleum. Petroleum becomes hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons become benzene. Benzene becomes modified molecules. And eventually those molecules become drugs. So we went on an exploration last week. Something very fascinating. A little diversion from the typical, not bone and joint stuff. It was just kind of from the dirt. The difference between chemistry that grows and chemistry that is built. And why not? Gardens are just around the corner. Seeds will be sown. Synthetics will be sown too. Into tablets, then canisters, into little bottles. So the seed and the pill. You may never look at either one the same way again. Let's start with the seed for a review. It's the most powerful chemical manufacturing system on Earth. It's not a refinery. It's not a pharmaceutical plant. It's not a laboratory. It's a seed. And yes, a seed inside that tiny little structure, sometimes no bigger than a grain of sand, is a complete biochemical program. It's got instructions. It's got timing, architecture, repair, energy storage, growth signals, everything needed to build an entire organism getting ready for us. Maybe some of you are starting your seeds already indoor. And let's remember, of course, the roots, the stems, the leaves, the flowers, the fruit. By the way, did you know that you can grow peaches in the UP? We bought some trees from Snyder's a few years ago. Beautiful peaches. Keep that in mind. Seeds have defense compounds. Offense and defense. Tim was talking about his jiu-jitsu days. Or judo days. I guess seeds have some judo in them as well. They contain natural defense compounds that protect them from being eaten by insects, animals, and fungi, and microbes before they have a chance to germinate. From a plant's perspective, the seed is an entire genetic future. So plants load seeds with chemical defenses to preserve the future. These methods reduce many defensive compounds while preserving the nutrients. Here's one that you are all familiar with, capsaicin. It's a famous seed defense. Discourages mammals from eating pepper seeds, but does not affect birds, allowing birds to disperse the seeds. It's kind of cool. Seeds also contain vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. Sounds like a supplement almost. And it sounds like poetry, but it's not. It's biology. When the seed absorbs water, enzymes activate, cells begin dividing, metabolism begins, and suddenly the seed becomes something very extraordinary. They are a solar-powered biochemical factory. Plants take on that carbon dioxide from air, water from the soil, energy from the sunlight, and convert them into glucose. From simple sugar, life begins to branch out. Sugars become fiber. Sugars become pigments, vitamins, flavors, structural molecules, signaling compounds. Scientists studying plant metabolism estimate that plants produce thousands of specialized molecules, not one compound, not two compounds, thousands. And there's a list of those compounds which we went over last week. So when you eat that tomato this year, for example, out of your garden, you're not just eating one isolated chemical, you're eating a food matrix. Water, fiber, minerals, sugar, pigments, all interacting, all buffering, all participating in this metabolism together. This is not a chemistry as a single molecule, it's a system. Now, many seeds and plant foods support vascular health. Who doesn't need a little more blood flow? Flaxseed, sesame seeds, leafy greens, beans, fruits, vegetables. Those foods provide potassium, magnesium, fiber, antioxidants. And by the way, have you ever heard of the DASH diet? It's developed by the National Institute of Health, has been shown to lower blood pressure. One of the most powerful tools for lowering blood pressure sometimes is not even a drug. It's a diet pattern and built around plants. Called the DASH diet, Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. Look it up. And it was developed by researchers, and they discovered some surprisingly simple concepts. When people increase foods like fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grain nuts, and seeds, and reduce sodium and reduce highly processed foods, blood pressure begins to fall. And why? Because these foods deliver minerals that the blood vessels depend on. The potassium, the magnesium, the calcium, the fiber, plant compounds that support the lining of our arteries. In clinical trials, the DASH diet, based on those concepts, lowers blood pressure by 8 to 14 points in some people. That's a change that's comparable to what a single blood pressure medication might achieve in mild to moderate hypertension. Pretty cool. And again, those key players, in case you're taking mental notes, flaxseed, sesame seeds, beans, leafy greens, and whole grains. Not one isolated chemical, it's the matrix that works together. And they all play a role. So, help control guts, inflammation, etc. Now let's shift a little bit as we round out this review to synthetic chemistry, because this is where the story begins to change. Think about that seed again that I just went over. Place it in soil, add sunlight, water, builds itself. But medications don't grow. You know that. They're designed, they're engineered, they're manufactured, and the pathway from raw material to finished drug begins somewhere where you might not expect. Petroleum. So let's stroll down the synthetic sidewalk and listen to what you might prefer, or at least have a better comprehension after I'm done. The simplified pathway looks like this. Petroleum, yes, the same crude oil that fuels cars and airplanes, also supplies many of the starting building blocks used in modern pharmaceutical chemistry. Now, that does not mean that the pill in your medicine cabinet is crude oil, just like a dining table is not a forest, but petroleum contains a mixture of carbon molecules that chemists can reshape and rebuild. So think of the petroleum as a raw lumber of the synthetic chemistry. Refineries break petroleum into smaller chemical fractions, and from those, chemists isolate these simple fractions. And one of the most important molecules is benzene. Now, if you look up benzene, as our electrical engineer, moonlighting chemist Uncle Tim said last week, he remembers back in the day at some of the factories they had benzene as a solvent, and they stopped it because benzene by itself is a cancer-causing agent. But in chemistry, benzene then is like the scaffold to structure and start your pharmaceutical. And from that point, that simple ring, the chemists begin to modify the structure, adding atoms, changing bonds. I mean, this is obviously clearly crazy stuff, not in the sense of like crazy, just what chemists have done in order to create the pharmaceuticals. But again, it starts with crude oil, made from there, fractioned down into benzene, and then rebuilt step by step, reaction by reaction. So it's the benzene to the modified benzene molecules to the pharmaceutical compounds to the purified drug. So it looks like this. Here's your flow chart. Petroleum, benzene, modified molecules, pharmaceutical drug. Bang. Into your tummy. Again, the benzene is not the pill, it's the scaffold. So here is a bit of a metabolic paradox for you. This is where it appears. And just so we're all on the same page, real quick A paradox is a situation or a statement that seems contradictory or opposite on the surface, but still may contain truth or reality when examined more deeply. So a paradox, again, is this. A medical paradox would be an example. The same drugs that save lives can also harm. The food paradox. The more processed food a society eats, the more nutrition problems it often develops. Then there's the modern health paradox. The more advanced medical systems in history also produces millions of drug-related injuries each year. So the paradox is when these two themes seem to contradict each other and turn out to exist at the same time. So we went through that. We went through the physiology, again, of the seed compared to the pharmaceutical. It was quite the little eye-opening experience, a little diversion, like I said, from the bone joint, muscle, tendon thing I typically like to do. Keep in mind, one is grown and one is built. One is written by biology, one is written by chemistry. Which one is more sympathetic to you? Your biochemistry of your heart, your liver, your kidneys, and more. Keep that in mind as you wait in line to buy seeds or vines or arrive at the pharmacy on time. There was more. However, if you missed the entire show and want to be more in the know, then log on to my website, drlarryradio.com. Hit the subscribe button, follow the links, and listen to that show. It's been uploaded now, which you can listen to at your leisure as a podcast. And here's the final point. If you like to give what your body needs, just remember to try and get everything that starts from a seed. Now, beyond that, in addition to the dirt, last week we learned a simple self-test for knee noise. It was another Dr. Larry cool tool, and you can call my office for a freebie reminder just in case you're in need of a retip or a tip up. And so that was last week. Hi, yeah. Now today we'll forget that monologue for a moment and keep remembering those mandatory communication skills all doctors must have, which are inquisitive listening and staying positive. Again, it often means the difference between sick and well. Also, it's another month of the year, so let's keep our necks in gear. So in our tip and trick segment today, we're going to learn a simple self-test for neck noise now. We'll just keep moving up the body, like sands in the neck, like sand sound in your neck. And of course, you snap into a tim-tim, are calling out right from the broadcast booth while we crank up the tunes and I hit the center stage for the demo. However, before all that, in order to have good health, you don't need a lot of wealth. So let's flex our forebrain and put some knowledge to the game, because today we're going to talk about, hit it, Pearl.
Dr. Larry brings you another segment of Did You Know?
Whiplash. It's quite the bash. Against ligaments, muscles, nerves, and more, whiplash can leave you feeling super sore. So what is whiplash? Who gets it? How do you get it? How do you fix it? It's the Whiplash Bash when we get back from the break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Dr. Larry Radio Show.
Dr. Larry will be back in a moment.
What's cooking in your community? Head to one of these fine establishments for your next bite or beverage.
Alpha Michigan Brewing Company on the Circle in Alpha opens at 4 Wednesday through Friday and noon on Saturdays and Sundays. Call 920-358-9551 or go to alphamichiganbeer.com or Facebook for tap menu and events.
The Habit Bar and Grill, Highway A in Nelma, Wisconsin on the Snowmobile Trail, and offering premium gas and daily specials. Open 10 a.m. 7 days a week. Call The Habit, 715-545-2646.
The Horseshoe Bar, downtown Amasa, opens at noon, 7 days a week. Burgers, sandwiches, nachos, crazy broad specialty homemade pizzas, and deep fryer snacks, too. It always tastes better at the Horseshoe Bar, downtown Amasa.
The Local Eats List from your friends at WIKB WFER.
I would never recommend buying a home without having the water tested first. It's cool, it's clear, it looks clean. Oh, it tastes good. Well, what's really in it? And we just recommend that you check it out. I'm Jennifer Toivonen. I'm a co-lab director at Whitewater Associates of Amasa. Coliform bacteria, lead, arsenic, nitrates, nitrites. You want to be sure that water is safe. I would recommend giving us a call. That way we can tailor the kit that we send to you for what you need. 906-822-7889. Give us a call.
Sagola Township Sportsman's Club is excited to host a Youth Day outdoor adventure dedicated to getting kids back outside. This event will be free for all kids. The day will include a trout fishing pond, outdoor games, plus there will be prizes and giveaways. They need your support because an event like this comes with many expenses. Every contribution, big or small, helps. They're incredibly grateful for any help that you can offer. Need more information? Contact Danielle at 906-282-5845.
This is Scott from Crystal Falls, and you're listening to Dr. Larry Radio.
Breaks over. Time to get cracking once again with Dr. Larry.
Welcome back. It's the Whiplash Bash. And no, it's not an 80s rock concert. It's whiplash. The kind that causes an injury and not a rash. Have you ever had it? How do you know if you did or did not? What is true whiplash and how to treat it in a flash? A middle-aged mom checked herself into my office. She was struck from behind as she was stationary in her vehicle waiting to turn left off of US 2. The other driver was going at a high rate of speed, somewhere around 60 miles an hour. Distracted was the excuse, and smashed into the direct rear end of my patient's vehicle. Thankfully, no fatalities in either case, but the result was whiplash. In another case, a patient was driving near Econo Foods in Iron Mountain. She was gliding to a stop at the stoplight and was struck from behind. Both vehicles moving, both going at a lower rate of speed, no fatalities. However, the patient who was struck suffered whiplash. And finally, another case, unusual circumstance. Two patients were driving, separate cars. One pulling out of Walmart, head home to Iron County, and the other was driving at a normal rate of speed to head home to Iron County as well, too. The one patient pulled out in front of the other. Side impact to one car, front impact to the other car. And my question to you is this: which patient suffered from whiplash? Or was it even whiplash? And do you always have to be in an auto accident to get it? Or can you get it from a slip and fall? Football or baseball? How about a long day of fishing? Or blowing out candles on a birthday wishing? Let's define it. Absolutely. Here is whiplash. By pure definition, we got to start first and then build from there. It's important to know because it's a little elusive sometimes on what it can be from. So whiplash is a neck injury that happens when the head is suddenly thrown backwards and then forward, sometimes side to side, with enough force, and I'm going to insert into this, they studied this, they said about 8 miles an hour of force, which doesn't seem like a lot, but 8 miles an hour of force is like the threshold, that the soft tissues around the neck get overstretched or strained. It is most commonly associated with car accidents, of course, especially rear-end collisions. I think that gets the most attention, but it can also happen in sports injuries, falls, work accidents, or sudden jolts. So keep that in mind. The work accident tends to get a little more attention, and as Jim and I were talking on telephone time before we started the whole show today, he asked me about, what about concerts and people, do they get whiplash from, well, a whiplash bash? You're at a great 80s concert, you're in the front row, mosh pit, can you get whiplash from that? So, yeah, absolutely. And then his question was, well, what do people say? They say they actually call it out. They say, I think I've got whiplash, Dr. Larry. But it's usually the auto accident, and it's something like that, whereby the whiplash tends to kind of get its best, highest attention. But there are other cases where whiplash can happen. So the overall mechanism to keep in mind is this: anytime that you have a rapid acceleration and deceleration, again, I didn't put necessarily miles per hour in there. In plain English, when the body moves one way and the head lags behind and then snaps in the opposite direction, that sudden motion can create abnormal stress on the muscles, ligaments, and tendons, joints, discs, nerves, and cervical spine or the neck. Even a crash that does not look dramatic on the outside, well, the car's not damaged, but that energy has to go someplace. And so if you get into an auto wreck, and maybe it's not a crunched car, and you go, well, how could I have gotten this injured? This is what I'm talking about. Structures that are commonly affected. Multiple areas of the neck. Now, the neck muscles, of course. Ligaments, though. I feel a little bad for ligaments sometimes. They don't get as much attention as they deserve. Ligaments that stabilize your neck. I just checked out ligaments today on a couple of patients. It wasn't whiplash that I could tell at this point in time, but I was checking out the ligaments as well. Not just if the bone is out of place as a chiropractor. But ligaments can get injured. Tendons, the joints that connect your neck, called facet joints. The discs, of course. The nerve roots coming out of the neck and surrounding soft tissues. And sometimes the jaw, the shoulders, and the upper back area as well, too. So that's the structures that can get hammered. What about some symptoms? Some people feel it right away. I would tell you there's lots of times mostly a delay. Most of the cases whiplash worsen over several hours or typically by the next day. And one way I always say it is usually within 5 days, you're going to start feeling symptoms of whiplash. That's usually within 5 days. Not typically the first 24 hours. It just doesn't seem to be the norm when patients come in, or at least when I've taken histories. I thought I was fine, Dr. Larry, and then all of a sudden I developed all these symptoms. Neck pain and stiffness, reduced range of motion, headaches, often starting though at the base of the skull, shoulder and upper back pain, muscle tightness, pain between the shoulder blades, dizziness. We're going to talk about that for a second, or in a second. Fatigue, tingling or numbness into the arm or hands in some cases, and foggy feeling in your brain. Like just kind of don't have a spatial awareness. Whiplash. So it's not just a sore neck if you're starting to kind of get layered here. It's a real acceleration, deceleration injury. And I would say chiropractic school did a phenomenal job of really making us understand what whiplash is, taking out however it happens. It's just, what is it? It's rapid acceleration and deceleration injury that can affect several important structures in and around the neck. And symptoms can range from mild stiffness to significant pain. Headaches is a big one, nerve irritation, and then limitations in functions as well, too, in other areas. So that's the basic definition. That gets us kind of started. It wets the palate a little bit. It gives us that little sip of water. And humanly, we think whiplash should be almost gone as quickly as it starts. Sore for a few days, then good to go. And that can be true, but what about lingering whiplash? Let me roll back the clock here in the first case. I didn't get the patient on the first case until 6 months after the injury. All the main symptoms went away, so everything you just heard was gone, except for a few. She was properly treated at a physical therapist for all of those months, but still had these few lingering symptoms that just weren't going away. And by the way, I do have to insert a side comment here. So here a patient was treated successfully. However, the case should have been referred into a chiropractic office, could be my office or somebody else's, after the PT was done. But unfortunately, still to this day, PTs are not as cooperative with continuity of care. So now the patient's suffering. So the awareness that I'm trying to give you is the fact that the whiplash symptoms still were not effectively gone. Most were, but some were hanging on. And here's the ones that were hanging on still. Headaches, tension style, like a hat band at the base of the skull that wraps around to the front of the head. Neck stiffness to only one side, and dizziness. Those are the three things that were still remaining. Enough to where the patient was like, if I don't have to, I really don't want to live like, with these symptoms, if I don't have to, is there another solution, and what can be done about it? So, another comment is I've seen also these same symptoms in patients linger for years afterwards if they aren't treated. So the crash ends fast, but the injury may not. That's kind of what happens with understanding with whiplash. And one of the biggest misunderstandings is actually what it is, because they hear the word and often gets kind of shrunk and dismissed. And That's kind of on the provider side of things as well, too. Other than a few cases, let's say I use the auto accident because it's the easiest one to do. But if you slipped and fell on the ice, can that cause whiplash? Now that you heard the definition, rapid acceleration and deceleration, absolutely. If you get shoved from behind or from the side, could that cause whiplash? Absolutely, it could. And the list starts to go on. We can start adding in sports, but just kind of think in your mind, if you have had a rapid acceleration and rapid deceleration that generally falls around 8 miles an hour. Now, what's 8 miles an hour? Think of like go back to the car analogy again, or the car situation. A little bump in the back, whoop, head snaps back a little bit. That's enough to start to generate a whiplash. And again, it doesn't have to be 60 miles an hour. It doesn't have to be 50 miles an hour. Of course, that's going to hurt, but it can be just enough of a nudge sometimes. So again, a quick shove, a slip but not fall on the ice. These are all whiplash scenarios. Rapid acceleration, deceleration. It doesn't have to be overly dramatic either. Now, go into the provider's office and they'll think, okay, sore neck, take a pill, sit still, wait till it heals. But that, unfortunately, is not how it always happens. Sometimes whiplash is just not the soreness. It's just not the tension. It's the real structural and functional injury. And that's one of the biggest mistakes of the undiagnosed, the lingering whiplashes that I tend to see that come into at least the healthcare setting that I'm in. Nothing's broken. Nothing serious necessarily happened. And there's these symptoms. But if we classify it that way, if we take diagnostic imaging on a patient with whiplash, you're not always going to be able to pick it up. Now, there's some little side arguments that could be made that, yes, you can see some whiplash configurations in the neck. And by the way, I'm using neck, of course, as the model area of the spine. But remember what I said, too. Anytime there's a rapid acceleration or deceleration, then you can get whiplash anywhere in the body. It's just not necessarily called that. The Quebec Task Force, leave it to the Canadians, described whiplash associated disorders as injuries caused by the mechanism that is described to you. In plain English, the injury is defined more so by force and mechanism rather than by one single scan or finding as far as the diagnosis. That's important because typically we want to see a picture, an x-ray that shows it. We want an obvious scan or a test. Something proof, black and white, says, I have whiplash. And not even on the provider side of things. Something that we want to see if you had an accident. But typically what happens is, and then let's say you went to the ER, no breaks, no fractures, and no other pathology. So it looks like you got into a car accident. You're going to be sore for a few days. Here's some muscle relaxers, anti-inflammatory. If it doesn't get better, call your primary. But there's these lingering cases that happen too. The neck, of course, and the spine itself is complex. With the ligaments that stabilize, the joints that guide the motion, the discs that cushion the vertebrae, and the muscle tendons. So what shows up on imaging is not often much. And the reason why I'm focusing on this point is because rarely when I get these lingering cases in here, or if somebody had something other than an auto accident or the mosh pit at a rock concert, they're not typically coming in with, I've got whiplash. Fast forward, sometimes decades later, that's sometimes where it starts to resurface because somebody goes, oh yeah, I got a recent x-ray and it shows this area in the neck that was perfect. Everything else is perfectly fine, but this one area in my neck is really bad. It must have been from that accident I had 20 years ago, and now they're calling it whiplash. So if you catch that bridge there, sometimes the delay in the correct diagnosis is decades because that's when it shows up on imaging. It's not initial. It's later on in life. But what about those 10 or 20 years in between? Not knowing what your symptoms are, not knowing what to do about it, feeling like, how could it be from that slip fall, that accident, that fall on the ice, that almost fall? How could it have been for me rapidly turning my head quick sometimes because I was scared about something? All those little things that cause that rapid acceleration, deceleration. So keep that in mind. A CT scan is excellent for bone injury, but not for proving the pain source in routine whiplash. An MRI can sometimes show disc injury early, some swelling around the area, but many patients with real whiplash symptoms do not have an overly dramatic MRI, and that's the truth. Imaging is more helpful and powerful for ruling out the acute problems and also the severely chronic problems, but there's that in-between problem area where what do you do when you get treated? And that matters. That matters a lot because, again, the cases that I just kind of started to highlight, there were delays, at least in 2 of those, in getting proper treatment. One of the most subjective tools, though, in chronic post-whiplash neck pain is the fact that there's some diagnostic tests that can be done in a chiropractic setting, obviously a physical therapy setting, a dialed-in primary care setting can do things to start to be able to build the case that you have whiplash without the imaging, of course, to back it up. So let's make this a little real for you. Take the 40-ish-year-old patient struck at 60 miles an hour. It's not a tap, not a bump, force with speed, and it had consequences. At first, the patient had all the classic symptoms: neck pain, stiffness, headaches, dizziness. Fast forward 6 months, 3 symptoms remain: hat band headache, starting from the base of the skull, stiffness in the neck, especially to one side, and dizziness. And now you start thinking, why are they all still hurting? And a good question would be, why wouldn't they still be hurting if the injury involved those joints and the ligaments and the motion of the disturbed nerves? So when it comes to these points, is effectively, you almost have to peel it away like an onion layer. You have to tackle 1 or 2 things, and sometimes just one thing at a time. Usually the neck stiffness and range of motions first, then you peel that away, you get to the dizziness, and then you peel that away, and you get to some of the other headache generators or things that like that nature. So long-term whiplash, you kind of have to start to layer them one at a time to get rid of the problems. Now, could you have other things associated with the whiplash that became additional problems? Absolutely, yes. So the point is that keep in mind, and I'm going to rattle off a few studies here, then we're going to cut to a break and come back. In a 2022 review, headache and dizziness supports the fact that whiplash can happen, and these are some of the components from it. Recovery after whiplash, in a 2016 review, some literature showed that if the recovery is going to happen, much of it tends to be in the first 3 months, with less improvement after that, and persistent symptoms last from 6 months on into years and even decades. So again, one of these things that we hear the term, we know it, we understand it, and we think we got our minds around it, but whiplash can really start to hang on as time goes on, and you have to know what it is and what it could stem from. Now, where else can whiplash happen? Where else can it possibly happen? More with the Whiplash Bash. I'll do that when we get back from the break. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Dr. Larry Radio Show.
We'll be right back with Dr. Larry.
Here's your Iron River and surrounding area forecast. A mix of clouds and sun this afternoon with daytime highs approaching 45. Southeasterly winds around 5 miles per hour. Cloudy skies tonight, slight chance for mixed precipitation, lows around 34. About an inch of snow Saturday night. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki on WIKB. Right now, 39.
True Recycling of Caspian, Michigan. Buyers of copper, aluminum, brass, and other recyclable metals. Check them out on Facebook or at truerecycling.com, 906-265-9262. True Recycling, saving the planet, 1 ton at a time.
I got injured in a co-ed soccer league. They immediately told me that I'm going to have to speak with an orthopedic surgeon. My first thought was OSMS. I knew they worked with athletes in the past, and I knew that they had really good orthopedic surgeons. The team at OSMS really were all on board with getting me back to what my life was. My goals were their goals. I wanted to get back to my best, and they wanted the same thing for me. It's amazing that I can still do what I did before. I'm back thanks to OSMS.
Does your financial advisor take the time to really listen to you? Is your financial strategy personalized to you and your family? Will your financial advisor be there as your life and financial situations change? When you work with Ryan O'Grady, your Crystal Falls Edward Jones financial advisor, he focuses on what's important to you. You work together and use an established process to create a personalized financial strategy, backed by the advice, tools, and resources to help you reach your goals. And you can partner long-term to help your strategy stay on track. Contact Ryan today at 906-875-3833. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Break's over. Time to get cracking once again with Dr. Larry.
Welcome back. Heavy duty clinical today, huh? Whiplash. So, whiplash without a car, same mechanism, different mayhem, a little bit kind of a abbreviated explanation. Newton's Law, as our resident scientist and electrical engineer let me know during the break. Newton's Law. Look it up, geeks. Check it out. Body in motion stays in motion, right? Is that right? Unless. All right. So one of the biggest misunderstandings about whiplash is that people think it belongs to only car accidents. It doesn't. In the medical literature, whiplash-associated disorders are defined around the acceleration and deceleration. Almost sounds like I'm doing thoracic outlet syndrome. Did you remember that? Thoracic outlet syndrome. Remember to tell your doctor if you have it. So the mechanism, though, of whiplash can affect the neck. And the second, though, misunderstanding is people hear whiplash and think neck only, but it's not the full story. The term is anchored to the cervical spine or the neck because that is where the classic definition sits and where the head, neck, lever system is easiest to study. But the literature also describes symptoms and dysfunction beyond the neck. Because whiplash is really just a mechanism. It's a motion, a force, a pattern. It's a fast snap, a hard whip, a sudden rip. Where the body moves, the head lags, the spine reacts, and the tissues get overloaded before they can protect themselves. That is why the concept can be applied beyond the motor vehicle setting, beyond the cervical spine. The only thing that biology and biomechanics care about is speed, direction, load, and timing. Not whether there was a bumper, not whether there was a football helmet, not whether there was a patch of ice. This is consistent with the standard definition of whiplash as energy is transferred from one thing to the next. Historically, the term whiplash got tied to the neck because the neck is highly mobile and the head acts like that weighted lever. Back to the Canadians, the Quebec Task Force framework later formalized the neck as the focus disorder, but broader reviews of whiplash come from reports that patients frequently have complaints that extend into the shoulders, upper back, arms, and sometimes farther down the chain. It's the same violent mechanism that can stress the other parts of the spine as well, too. Same force, same shove, same whip, same zip. In a 2018 literature review, they found considerable evidence for thoracic dysfunction in whiplash as well, too. You slip and fall on the ice, your feet shoot out from you, your torso drops, your head snaps back, and the force can load not only the neck, but the mid-back. Just had cases in like that this year in this county. A young lady slipped and fell on the ice, literally feet went out, landed on her middle back, snapped her head back, and she came in with mostly middle back spasms and some neck pain and some stiffness. She was miserable. That's a whiplash to the thoracic spine. Take a tackle football. Body gets driven one way, head goes another. It's not just another neck event. The whole spine, cervical, thoracic, low back, ribs, lumbar spine, low back starts to guard. You get bounced around in a mosh pit, as you heard us talk on telephone time. Shoved from behind, hit from the side, twisted off balance. Again, your tissues in your spine don't care where the force comes from. They don't care what's on the police report. They don't care about the guitar solo that you were listening to as you were headbanging. All your body cares about is where and how the whiplash happens, forceful acceleration and deceleration, and the list goes on. Wrestling, shoved unexpectedly. I have had whiplash cases come in, no joke, where somebody turned their head real quick because their alarm went off and they went to get out of bed. Whoop, snap. Just whip that neck around. Whiplash. Getting out of bed quick sometimes can do that as well, too, for your middle back. And it has a lot of the same vibe and symptoms. So you can have thoracic whiplash and lumbar whiplash. Now, you're not really going to be able to find that on the general Google searches. You might even get a little bit cross-eyed from practitioners, but dealing with patients who've had these types of injuries for all of these years, I always kind of go, it feels like a whiplash, sounds like a whiplash. And now I just kind of just say it. I'm like, well, you know what a whiplash is? Yes, doesn't happen in your neck, right, but you have it in your middle back this time. And that's why I wanted to frame this for you today, too, that it can happen in other parts of the body. Ribs, that thoracic cage, a slip fall on the ice like that, your ribs will feel like they've been lashed. Difficulty breathing, spasms, tightness, all that kind of stuff. Maybe the neck doesn't even hurt as bad, but you can get that same style mechanism of injury into your ribs as well, too, and even into your shoulders. So let's review again just kind of some of the symptoms. Neck pain, stiffness, reduced range of motion. Now we can add in, by the way, thoracic pain or mid-back pain, or also we can add in low back pain. Headaches, pain at the base of the skull, shoulder pain, mid-back pain, upper back pain, numbness and tingling, dizziness, and head fog. I'm adding that one in the else too, just to kind of a little bit of highlight. Of course, the dizziness matters, especially when it happens into the upper neck, and that's very important to kind of frame around too. Is that dizziness is still hanging on? It's one of those things where you want to kind of jump in and make sure you get treated for that. So, all told, most of them, a lot of them, start to get better within that 6-month period of time, but some don't. I had a case of a retired EMT come in. Literally, whole spine was mostly perfect, mid-70-year-old female. And one thing she recalled when I looked at her lower spine, I said, this looks like you've basically had a compression injury or whiplash or something in your back. I just got to throw those terms out there to keep people's brains going. She goes, I slipped and fell coming out of a residence, icy steps. I landed right on one of the steps and snapped back. She's like, I kind of dusted myself off, didn't think much about it. That was 30 years ago. Fast forward, she developed some pretty severe leg pain, back pain, stiffness, and right in a spot similar to like you would see in a neck was exactly a spot where it took the most force. It just took decades for that force to finally take over where it caused the injury. And I've seen it with, I've had patients slip off of roofs, sad to say too as well, survived, but they have long-term effects from whiplash-style injuries. And they can be a real bugger to try to treat and solve because a lot of times, like I said, maybe sometimes you were asymptomatic for quite a while, didn't really think much about it, but the tissue itself, the structure itself, was damaged all along the way. It's a creeper effect as far as that goes when it comes to whiplash. So the real takeaway is this. As you heard, whiplash is not just from a car accident, and it has the mechanism of injury that can affect your middle back, your upper back, your ribs, your low back, and broader into other body systems as well too. So whether it happens on black ice, in a football tackle, in a wrestling match, in a mosh pit, or from a sudden shove or some other event, the body doesn't care what you call it. It only cares about the force. The name might be narrow, the impact might be broad. The word says neck, the body says check the whole chain when it comes to a forceful acceleration and deceleration injury to your back, spine, or someplace else. Okay, upcoming commentary and our tip and trick of the week after the break. This is the Dr. Larry Radio Show. We'll be right back.
We'll be right back with Dr. Larry.
Spring is in the air, and Jensen Akins is a perfect place to help you spruce up your appliances to celebrate. We've got all the brand name appliances you trust, like Whirlpool, Maytag, and Amana, all set to brighten your home and make the chores in your life so much easier. And Jensen Akins doesn't just sell Whirlpool appliances, we service them as well. That's at Jensen Akins of Conover, of course.
What's cooking in your community? Head to one of these fine establishments for your next bite or beverage.
Alpha Michigan Brewing Company on the Circle in Alpha opens at 4 Wednesday through Friday and noon on Saturdays and Sundays. Call 920-358-9551 or go to alphamichiganbeer.com or Facebook for tap menu and events.
The Habit Bar and Grill, Highway A in Nelma, Wisconsin on the Snowmobile Trail and offering premium gas and daily specials. Open 10 a.m. 7 days a week. Call The Habit, 715-545-2646.
The Horseshoe Bar, downtown Amosau, opens at noon, 7 days a week. Burgers, sandwiches, nachos, crazy broad specialty homemade pizzas, and deep fryer snacks too. It always tastes better at the Horseshoe Bar, downtown Amosau.
The Local Eats List from your friends at WIKB WFER.
I would never recommend buying a home without having the water tested first. It's cool, it's clear, it looks clean. Oh, it tastes good. Well, what's really in it? And we just recommend that you check it out. I'm Jennifer Toivonen. I'm a co-lab director at Whitewater Associates of AMASA. Coliform bacteria, lead, arsenic, nitrates. You want to be sure that water is safe. I would recommend giving us a call. That way we can tailor the kit that we send to you for what you need. 906-822-7889. Give us a call.
True Recycling of Caspian, Michigan. Buyers of copper, aluminum, brass, and other recyclable metals. Check them out on Facebook or at truerecycling.com. 906-265-9262. True Recycling, saving the planet 1 ton at a time.
Breaks over. Time to get cracking once again with Dr. Larry.
Welcome back. All these little insightful in-between discussions on commercial breaks. Uncle Tim, the electrical engineer, retired. Boy, you start talking science and mathematics, and he's like, whoa, wait a second, and judo, and then all of a sudden he starts jumping into. So just to add, I'm going to bring you into the conversation because it's an interesting conversation, talking about whiplash. It was in judo, he was talking about how they taught them to fall a certain way with the head chin tucked forward and then slap the hands down and you're going backwards if you're tossed or you fall. Because light bulb, it spreads out the surface area, so your head doesn't snap back, of course, so you don't whack it against the pavement as well, too, or the floor. Also, it prevents whiplash. So anytime you can take and spread out the surface area of something, and that's why whiplash sometimes can happen in any part of the body. If it's unexpected, you couldn't brace for it, all of a sudden you have the rapid acceleration, deceleration. In cases where I would say patients saw or knew or could redistribute the force, definitely the whiplash isn't as bad or it's marginalized. So kind of an interesting between commercial conversation here. Newton's law, again, you geekies look that up. Newton's law. Isn't that the one where the old apple, right? Was that Newton's law from the old kid commercial? Am I having that right, Tim?
Well, yeah, gravity.
Gravity? Yeah, Newton's, okay, whatever goes up must come down.
Yeah, but you said before, whatever's in motion stays in motion unless something stops it.
Right, okay. A little throwback to some of the commercials I remember as a kid, too. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? I remember that one as a kid. Okay, so a little bit of commentary here as we're starting to wrap up the show. It's about the good old days, right? I think that's what the true UP can really take some pride in. Maybe he still exists in other small town areas, but the UP is special in that way. However, have you noticed a shift in healthcare? So, in healthcare, the good old days, and I'll say back in the day with your small town doc, back in the day, people who knew your name, that hasn't completely disappeared, but something's changed a little bit. When you try to use the healthcare system, try getting in to see a primary care doctor if you're a new patient right now. Try getting in with a specialist, neurology, rheumatology, nephrology, your kidneys and stuff like that. Weeks, months, sometimes longer. I had a patient tell me recently, whose wife went through some kidney problems. He said, Dr. Larry, I can't believe what we had to do in order to get in to see a kidney specialist. I said, I know. And it's just getting worse. Hospitals scaling back services. Remember when dialysis was available in Crystal Falls? Clinics not taking new patients or months to get in to see. Wait lists become the norm. And here's the reality, Bo. It isn't just a local issue. Nationally, there are tens of thousands of physician shortages, and projections show that the shortage growing significantly over the next decade. I happen to be on LinkedIn because it's a distribution channel for my shows when I'm done. So I'm not really like a social media person as far as that goes, but I happen to be on LinkedIn. And there's a doctor that I don't remember his name, but he's kind of well known, been doing podcasts for a long time. But he said the number one cause of death in resident physicians is suicide. And he got like massive responses on his LinkedIn profile of like doctors going, it's a burnout. The system pressures us. We're trying to perform under all this scrutiny, blah, blah, blah. And like he opened up a valve and all these physicians were just piling in with their comments. A bit of an eye opener. And then if you go out into the real like statistics we're talking right now, the trends start to get to the fact that the ones that are in practice tend to get bought out with their private practice, or they don't even start in private practice, they just go right to the hospital. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans lives in a primary care shortage areas. And in rural regions like the UP, it's worse. Now, we like to point to the obvious reasons. Corporate medicine, insurance companies dictating care. Corporations figured out that primary cares generate lots of referral revenue, so they entice them to come aboard and stay. We'll take care of all of the headaches for you. Just come under the wing. And yes, they do. They take care of a lot of the headaches, what primary care doctors have to deal with. That's getting worse as years go on. But it's not the whole story, because there's a time when private practices existed, the kind that people say they want, that are disappearing. The doctors are retiring, but they're not being replaced. You've seen it. Doc Smith retired. Nobody stepped into his clinic. Dr. Hahn retired. Nobody took over there. So it's not just a coincidence. It's a trend. And why? Because the next generation of physicians is looking at private practice and saying, too complex, too regulated, too much administrative burden, too much risk. And I'm going to give you a story here. There's a patient that comes in that vacations up here. His son-in-law was a young primary care physician. And back years ago when the office next to me was open, he said he was kind of just sick of the city life and he was young. I said, like, hey, I've got a great spot. I said, if he opens up a private practice here, I will tell you, if he's a good person and got his head on his shoulders and he's willing to work, he could have really a wonderful private practice up here. So I was trying to recruit a primary care doctor for you up here, just in case you didn't know. I think I told a few people this, but now I'm telling everybody. So he says, I'll talk to him. And he got back to me, and the answer was no, because of too complex, too regulated, too much administrative burden, too much risk. So they just go get employed with hospital systems in large groups. It's more stability, less autonomy, of course, but the shift comes at a cost, of course, to patients. Less access, less continuity, less relationship-based care. So now the question becomes this: who's left in the true private practice space? More and more, it's chiropractors. And not because it's easy, but because we've never had it easy. Chiropractic has always existed outside the mainstream system, which means we've had to learn how to operate independently, adapt quickly, build direct relationships with patients, and deliver care without relying on a system that was never really built for us anyway. And because of that, we're in a very good and unique position for you right now, because what is happening is this: there's a growing gap that's not getting filled fast enough. Patients don't just need treatment, they need guidance, they need direction, they need someone who understands the system well enough to help them navigate. And that's where the model is shifting, because a modern chiropractic office isn't just about the adjustments, it becomes a hub, a central point of coordination, a place where somebody looks at the whole picture and says, here's what's going on, here's what you need to do, here's what actually matters. And that's what I mean when I say the chiropractor can be a great quarterback for you, not replacing specialists, not doing every function of primary care, but helping you, the patient, get to the right specialist through a network of physicians and getting into the systems that you need to get into, but at least being a starting point. Not to do everything, not missing the important stuff, because again, a lot of patients right now feel like they're being bounced around the system without a clear coordinator. So, the opportunity, of course, comes with the same pressures that cause the traditional practices to disappear: administrative burden, insurance challenges, and time constraints and rising costs. So, we're basically a lot of the same heavy lifting to see patients for extended visits, making referrals, and reviewing records. And this model only works, of course, if it's supported, which brings me to this. To those patients of you out there who understand this, who value the access, who value relation-based care, and who show up, stay consistent, and support private clinics, you are the reason why these clinics still exist. And they continue to grow. Because if you truly want more time, more access, more personalized care, a chiropractor knows how to do this. But it has to be supported, which is a neat thing to see. Because on the mutual side of things, with that effort, it continues to grow and fill the void. Otherwise, we go back and can't go back to the good old days. We have to move farther away from them. But the trend is getting to the point where your chiropractor can be your best quarterback. Timmy Tim, weekly tip and trip. You head to the broadcast booth. I'm heading out stage for the demo, because today we're going to learn a simple self-test for neck noise. Ready? It's almost like a whiplash, Tim. Here we go. You blast out my eardrums. Everybody else is ready. Here we go.
Oh, Dr. Larry is sitting, and he's turning his head side to side and up and down.
Left and right.
Left and right.
So patients will ask me, is that noise in my neck okay? So if you just turn your head left and right and you hear sand, if you tilt your head up and down, don't give yourself whiplash, and you hear sandy noise, some clicks and problems, it ain't no big deal. It sounds crunchy though, Dr. Larry. It's gritty like sand in my neck. I know. It's a fancy term called crepitus. Sounds like creep, but it's called crepitus. You don't have to memorize it. In plain English, it just means some joints are a little stiff. Maybe got a little wear tear in the cartilage. Muscles might be a little tight. But simply that noise and the grinding is just some gas shifting in your neck on the joints. Maybe a little arthritis. But generally speaking, that neck noise ain't something really to worry about. I did this before, called crepitus. I actually had somebody come in and say, it's called crepitus. I never knew what it's called, Dr. Larry. And I was like, you remembered the term. Folks, remember, you can listen to me live right here every week to learn how to achieve a better back and better health. Or if you're having a pain or problem, I'm here to help. My number at the office is 906-875-3215. Have a good day, man on the board, and I'll see you next week, everybody.
The Northwoods home of classic rock and your favorite hits. 99.1 WIKB, Iron River, Crystal Falls, Florence. A listen-up radio station.